Hey folks, in this episode I'm going to show you how to make this procedural damage detail mask here. The mask is relatively easy to make. You can use it in combination with procedural textures or image textures, and by adding damage to your scenes can significantly help improve photorealism. So without further ado, let's get to it. So open up Blender. The first thing we'll do is we'll go to Edit, Preferences, and under Add-ons we're going to search for Node and then enable the Node Wrangler here. Once you've enabled that, we're going to click this button and click Save Preferences, and that will ensure the Node Wrangler loads every time you load Blender. This is my demo scene here. You can use any objects. I'll just hit numpad 0 to go into camera view. I'm going to select this wall object in the background. I'm going to take my cursor to the bottom left of the 3D viewport until I see a crosshair. I'll left click, drag up and open up a new window. I'll then change this from the 3D viewport to the shader editor. I'll then click New. I'm going to name this material Damage Detail Mask. I'll hit N to hide the N panel. I'm just going to zoom in. I'm going to give this material a random colour, maybe blue. I'll then go into rendered view. I'm going to select my column, shift select Suzanne, shift select the cube, shift select the sphere, and finally shift select the background object. So with the background object as the active object, I'm going to hit Ctrl L and I'll choose Link Materials. Now we've all got the same material. Excellent. I'll just increase my shader editor window so we've got a bit more room. So I guess the first thing we'll do is build the mask itself. So I hit Shift A, I'm going to go Input and I'll choose Texture Coordinate. Shift A, I'll go Texture and we'll choose Noise Texture. Shift A, I'm going to go Converter and we'll choose Color Ramp. Shift A, we'll go Vector and we'll choose Bump. I'm going to connect the object coordinate to the vector of the noise texture. I'll change the noise texture from 3D to 4D. I'll then connect the factor from the noise texture to the factor of the color ramp, and the color from the color ramp into the height of the bump node. I'll then connect the normal socket from the bump node to the normal socket in the principal BSDF. I'm going to set the distance on the bump to 1, and maybe I'll set the strength to 2. That might be a bit strong, but we'll adjust it a bit later. And on the bump node, I'm going to enable invert, and I'll set my roughness on my principal BSDF to 1. On the color ramp, I'm going to change the interpolation type from linear to ease. I'll select the back flag, and I'm going to set the position to 0.6. Maybe I'll set it to 0.55. I'll then select the white flag, and I'm going to set this to 0.62. On my noise texture, I'm going to set the scale to 4. I'll set the detail to 12. I think I might even decrease the distance on my bump node to 0.1. I'll just zoom out, and this will be the basis of our damage mask. I'll box select all of these nodes here. I'm going to hit F to add a frame, and I'll rename the frame to Damage Mask. I'll then hit N to open up the N panel, and on your node tab up here, I'm going to enable Color. I'll expand these options, and I'm going to give this a random color, something around there perhaps. I'll just hit N to hide the N panel. I'm going to zoom out. I'll take this principal BSDF. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate, and I'm going to drag it up to around about there. Maybe I'll set this color to like an orangey color, sandstone, maybe something around there. I'll then hover my cursor over the color swatch. I'm going to hit Ctrl C. I'll then take it down here and hit Ctrl V to paste. I'll then hit Shift A. I'm going to go Shader, and I'll choose Mix Shader, and I'll pop that down here. I'm going to connect this into the bottom socket, and I'll connect this one into the top socket. I'll then connect this color ramp from the damage mask into the factor of the mix shader. I'll also connect the normal socket from this bump node into the normal socket of this principal BSDF. I'll then select this top principal BSDF. I'm going to hit F to add a frame, and I'm going to rename this to Base Shader. I'll select this principal BSDF. I'm going to hit F, and I'll rename this frame to Damage Shader. Maybe I can tone down the colours on this one. So I'm going to work on a basic material for this base shader. So over here, I'm going to hit Shift A. I'm going to go Input, and I'll choose Texture Coordinate. Shift A, I'm going to go Texture, and we'll choose Noise Texture. I'll pop that there. Shift A, I'm going to go Converter, and we'll choose Color Ramp. I'll hit Shift D and duplicate that color ramp. Shift A, I'm going to go Color, and we'll choose Mix Color. I'll pop that there. I'll then connect the object socket from the texture coordinate into the vector of the noise texture. I'll change the noise texture from 3D to 4D. I'll then connect the factor from this noise texture into the factor of this color ramp and into the factor of this color ramp. I'll then connect the color socket from this color ramp into the factor of this mixed color node. I'm going to hover my cursor over this color swatch in my base shader. I'm going to hit Ctrl C to copy. I'll then hit Ctrl V to paste and Ctrl V to paste in there. I'll then select this colour, and I'm going to darken this down to around about there. Maybe we'll take the saturation down slightly. I'll then connect the result from this mixed colour node into the base colour of the principal BSDF. I'll change the interpolation type on this bottom colour ramp from linear to ease, and I'll also do the same for this top colour ramp here from linear to ease. With the black flag selected on this colour ramp, I'm going to change the position to 0.3, and for the white flag, I'm going to change the position to 0.7. Now you can see we're getting a bit of colour variation there. Excellent. So with this noise texture, I'm going to set the scale to 8, I'm going to set the detail to 12, and I'll set the roughness to 0.75. So the only bump we've got in our scene is the bump of these cracks here. I want bump on the surface of the wall, and I also want bump in the damaged parts. So I'll box select these. I'm just going to hit G, move them up there slightly. I'll then hit Shift A, I'm going to go vector and choose bump. I'll then connect the factor from the noise texture into the height of the bump node. I'll then connect the normal socket from this bump node into the normal socket of this bump node. And maybe I can increase the distance on this bump node to 0.025. Okay, we're getting a bit of bump on the outside, a bit of bump on the inside. We are going to add additional bump on the inside here. We'll do that in a minute. But first, I want to connect this colour ramp into the roughness of this principal BSDF. I also want to connect it into the roughness of this principal BSDF. I'll then zoom into that colour ramp. I'm going to select the black colour swatch, and I'm going to increase the value to, let's say, around about 0.7. And now I want to connect the colours from this mix colour node into the base colour of this damage shader. Of course, we don't want the underside of the damage to be the same colour, so I need to darken this up a little bit. So I'm going to hit Shift A, I'm going to go colour, and we'll choose mix colour, and I'll pop that in there. I'm going to change it from mix to multiply. I'll then change the colour in socket B to black. I'll then take the colour socket from the colour ramp in the damage mask into the mix factor of this mix colour node. And now all we need to do is increase or decrease the brightness of this colour socket to suit our needs. So I'm going to go with something around there. Let's move on to adding a bit of bump in these damage sections. So maybe I'll just box select these nodes here. I'm going to hit G, just bring them across over to here. I'll then hit Shift A, I'm going to go input and we'll choose texture coordinates. Shift A, I'm going to go texture and we'll choose noise texture. Shift A, I'm going to go vector and we'll choose bump. We do not want the additional bump to affect the rest of the surface. We only want it to affect the inside of the damaged parts. And that's why I separated the damage shader with the base shader. It just makes this process a little bit easier. So I'm going to take this bump node and I'll pop it in between this bump node and the normal socket of the damage shader. I'll connect the object socket from the texture coordinate into the vector of the noise texture. I'll set the noise texture from 3D to 4D. I'll then plug the factor from the noise texture into the height of the bump node. I'll set the scale to 8. I'm going to set the detail to 4. I'm going to set the roughness to 0.75. I'll then set the distance on this bump node to 0.1. Maybe I can increase the detail on this noise texture to 5. And maybe I'll reduce the scale to 7.5. On the bump node in the damage mask, I'm going to set the distance to 1. I'm going to randomly change the W factors on these noise textures. So I'm going to set this one to 1. I'll set this one to 2. And I'll set this one to 3. So that's the damage mask. We could also use this with image textures. So I'll just give you a basic example. If I hit Shift A, I'm going to go shader and I'll choose principal BSDF. I'll pop that here. With the principal BSDF selected, I'm going to hit Control Shift T. I'll choose a set of PBR image textures for this material here. I'll select the reflection map. I'm going to select the normal map. I'll select the gloss map and I'll select the color map. I'll then click Principal Texture Setup. I'll just hit G just to move these out of the way. I'll then grab this over to here. And instead of using this damage shader here, I'm going to use this set of PBR image textures. I'll then plug this into the bottom socket. At current, I haven't got a UV map. I need to change my coordinates to object. And on my image textures, I'll also change it from flat to box. And that just ensures I get a good projection. Now we need to combine the bump from this damage mask with the bump on these image textures. So I'll hit Shift A, I'm going to go converter and we'll choose vector math and I'll pop that in between there. I'm going to change the image texture bump to the bottom socket of the vector math. I'll then connect the normal socket from the damage mask bump node into the top socket of the vector math. And if I wanted to add the additional bump from these noise textures here, that's easy enough. I'll just take this bump node, I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate and I'll pop it in between the vector math node and this principal BSDF. I'll then plug the factor from this noise texture into the height of this bump node here. So you can combine this with image textures. So you can have a set of image textures here. You could also plug image textures into here rather than having procedural textures. I'm going to select this principal BSDF. I'm going to hit delete. Box select these. I'll hit delete. I'll box select these. I'll hit delete. I'll then drag this mix shader over to here, drag this over to here, and I'll reconnect the damage shader, Principal BSDF, into the bottom socket of the mix shader. This should also work in EV. Before we clean up the node structure, it's a good idea to save your project. So I'm going to go to File, Save As, and I'm going to save my project as like and subscribe. Thanks folks, you absolute legends, and then click Save As. With my cursor in the node editor, I'm going to hit Control Space, and that will go into full screen. I'll clean up the node tree. It's a fairly straightforward process. I'll just show you a couple of moves and I'll time lapse the rest. So if I hold down Shift, right click and drag through these two noodles, it will join them together. I can then hit G and bring them across over to there. And then maybe I'll hold down Shift, right click and drag through this noodle. I'm going to hit G, just bring this down to here. So with this noodle point selected, I'll then Shift select this noodle point. I can then hit S, X, 0, and that will align them on the X axis. And you can do the same for the Y axis too. So I'll continue this process with the reroute nodes and I'll get back to you as soon as I'm done. Okay, this is the final node structure. I did make one change. So instead of having this mix color ramp plugged into the mix factor of this mix color node, instead I plugged this factor from the noise texture directly into the factor of this mix color node. I'll hit Control Space to exit out of full screen. That's the tutorial in a nutshell. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please click like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. Have a great day, level up, and thanks for watching.